Hello, my name is Neil Latham. Today I'll be talking to you about my project called DocuDigitize. Essentially, we're going to be using the following AWS services, which will be AWS Cloud Shell, AWS S3, which is our storage system. We'll be using AWS Textract, which is an optical character recognition solution from Amazon. And then finally, we'll be using DynamoDB. And essentially, what we're doing is we're taking a standard healthcare form called CMS 1500. It's a form that patients and healthcare providers use to send in a claim to an insurance carrier to get reimbursed for any work that a patient has received or has been given by a practitioner, doctor, or a hospital, etc. So, at my company, we actually process these healthcare claims today manually, and it's very common that they're processed manually. It's a process that has not yet been digitized by our industry. So that's what I'm looking to do here today, to see if we can at least do the first part, which is extract this main form that is used in the claim process. So let's go through the workflow because I'd like to just explain that. So essentially, we start with a PDF, and that contains all of the information about the patient, their service, when they had it, what the service was, how much it cost, etc. What we're then going to do in the workflow is we need to convert that PDF file into a TIFF file. That's the standard format that the healthcare industry uses to process these particular files. So once we actually have our TIFF file, then we can really start working with it. So the next thing that we're going to do is upload that TIFF file to an S3 bucket where it will sit and be processed. Once we have the file into the S3 bucket, we're going to use Amazon's OCR solution, which is called Amazon Textract. Very powerful tool that identifies locations on a document where you can see a label and a value. And essentially, what we then need to do is extract that information using Textract from the document, and we need to push that into a DynamoDB with another Python script that you can see here. And so ultimately, we end up with that manual document in a zero and ones format where we can obviously do lots of very efficient work with it once we actually have it into a database. Today, this is a very manual process. It's referred to as key from image in the industry, and we have lots of thousands of people keying this information into a database today. So we're going to try and automate this particular part. Okay, so let's actually get into the demo. So the first thing that we're going to do, you can see we've got Amazon Cloud Shell up here. I already should have my Python script ready and teed up. The first thing that we need to do, however, is we need to load this PDF file. So let's go ahead and grab our PDF file. So Amazon makes everything pretty simple as usual. So I'm going to grab this 25 number here. So I'll refer to that number a little later on because it helps us identify and make sure that we actually have the right files. So it just takes a moment to upload. It looks like it's about a 2 MB file is what I think I saw there. Okay, so now we have our file sitting there. So you'll recall from the workflow, the next thing we have to do is get this PDF into a TIFF file. So I'm just going to quickly review the Python script so you just get a quick look at it. So let's take a look at, so it's our monitor and convert here. So we're just calling this Boto3 library, the OS library. Then we're declaring, or not declaring, but we're naming the buckets that are in that S3 folder. We're using a script to essentially convert that file and then also compress it and reduce the file size, because the native file size is well over 20 megabytes, and that's the limit on Amazon. You can't process files more than 20 megabytes. You can see that we're doing some adjustments on the aspect ratio. There's a compression called TIFF deflate that we're applying to it as well. We have some error handling to make sure the files handle correctly, and we can diagnose if we do have a problem. And then you can see down here that we're moving, once Once the file is picked up from the PDF folder, it's processed. It is then moved into a bucket called a folder called PDF processed. Very important. That makes sure that we never process the same file twice. It would be like having a duplicate record in a database, which can cause many problems, as I'm sure you can appreciate. And those are really the most important parts of the script. So let's go back and now let's go ahead and run this script because we need to convert this file to that TIFF file that I talked about. Okay, looks like everything's working well. Let's go back and look in our bucket to make sure that happened. So you recall that I said once the file has been processed, you can see it's gone here. So it's done its job. It's removed it. It should be sitting here. There it is. It's sitting in our PDF process bucket. And we should also have a TIFF file as well. There we do. We go. There we go. So now we've got the TIFF file that we can basically use Amazon Textract to pull all of the data from that document, from that TIFF document now. So let's go into the demo. So here we are in Amazon Textract. This technology from Amazon is quite a few years old at this point, but they've really refined the model, and now they're using inference models, and it's really improved from actually when we tried to do something with this about 5 years ago. And so delighted to see that they've made quite a significant amount of progress. You might recall that I mentioned this number 25. That's important because I've got that number 25 TIFF file sitting there. Let's go ahead and pull that in. I'm going to use this forms configuration. That gives me the key value pair structure that I need for the file. Very, very important. So we're going to use unstructured key value pairs for our database configuration. So let me go ahead and apply that. This takes a minute, which I think of all the things in the demo, we would need to try and optimize this performance in a production scenario, because it does take a minute here to pull this data in. So here you can see, let me zoom in a little bit. You can see here that it's picked up all of the labels and all of the associated data. So for example, you can see here, we've got the label patient's name, or, we would refer to that as our key, and then the patient's name, which we refer to as our value. So we have our key, patient's name, and then the patient's name, which would be the value, patient's address, which would be the key, the actual 958 Beacon Street, which is the actual value, and so on and so on. So I think it's fairly straightforward here what's happening. So it's pulled out or extracted all the information that it should have done. So let's go ahead now and download that file. So you can see here that it's downloaded, and it's actually downloaded it to another file where we're actually going to run another Python script on that file now. So this second Python script, which I'll go over with you here, is essentially pushing the data into that DynamoDB, and this file is quite a bit more involved, but I'll touch on some of the highlights here. So basically it's picking that file up. It's extracting those key value pairs from the file that Textract has created, and essentially it's creating a CSV file. I did test many file formats on this, JSON including, which was not as nearly as reliable as a CSV file. I thought JSON would have been much more reliable, but it wasn't. And so that's essentially what we're using. So you can see here that it's going to process all the TIFF files that it sees in that particular bucket. It's going to extract those key value pairs. It's going to upload that CSV back to the CS3 folder. And what else can we talk about? I think that's it. And then we have an error handling insertion here. And then the last part is that it's going to insert those key value pairs into our DynamoDB. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to our terminal. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and run the insertion. So this is the script for the insertion. Let's go ahead and run it. It's analyzing that TIFF file right now. There we go. That's a good sign. That means that the file is executed correctly. So let's go ahead and look at our DynamoDB. So you can see right now it's empty, nothing's in here. If I go ahead and refresh it, there we go. We have all of our key value pairs that have been extracted from that manual. When we started with a manual PDF, we converted it to a TIFF, and now we actually have a really nice data set that we can push into other databases, into other tables. We can create triggers and pay claims in an electronic way versus the way that we're capturing the data today, which is keying directly from an image. So we're actually having this OCR engine remove that key from image part of the process for us. So you can see here, just to kind of cover off a few things, we have, let's find the patient's name. There it is, patient's name, Alex Johnson. This is really, really neat. Here's the name of the provider. It's Dr. Yu Lee. The insurance plan. There's everything that we need here to, really start to do some post-processing on this data and clean it up. I'm not going to cover any querying in DynamoDB. That wasn't the scope of this project. The scope of this project was to take a manual form, extract data from that form using Textract Amazon Web Services, which I've demoed here today, and then create a file that can be used in other ways in the claim flow process. And this would be a really big efficiency and effectiveness boost for the industry. So I'm actually going to take this and present this to our technical leadership team to see if we can actually get some funding to start to do a bigger proof of concept on this. So thank you very much for your time today. My name is Neil Latham. It's been a pleasure.